the so-called minibus. Live coverage of the U.S. Senate here now on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Creator and sustainer of our world, every good and perfect gift comes from you. Give our lawmakers the wisdom to use your generous gifts for the glory of your name. May this proper use of your bounty provide them with the knowledge they need to solve the problems of our time, as they remember that without you they can do nothing. As you have blessed us in the past, we trust you, Lord, for our future. Give all who labor for freedom a deeper insight and loftier courage that will empower them to work for the coming day of your kingdom. We pray in your sacred name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., October 31st, 2011, to the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Christopher A. Coons, a senator from the state of Delaware, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
The Majority Leader.
Senator Richard Collada, fellow in Senator Murray's office, be granted floor privileges for the duration of today's session of the Senate.
Without objection, so ordered.
Following leader remarks, the Senate will be in a period of morning business till 4:30 today. At 4:30, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the nomination of Stephen Higginson to be a United States Circuit Judge for the Fifth Circuit. At 5:30, there will be a roll call vote on confirmation of Stephen Higginson. Mr. President, today I join millions of Nevadans in commemorating the day 147 years ago that Nevada joined the Union. Granted statehood during the bitter years of the Civil War in 1864, our mettle was tested from the very beginning. Today our state is once again tested. Too many Nevadans are still out of work or underwater in their homes. And this is during these rough times. It's all over the state of Nevada. But I know by facing our challenges together, we'll once again demonstrate the collective strength that comes from our motto, the state's motto, Battle-Born. Mr. President, this chart here appeared in last week's New Yorker magazine. I think it's pretty evident what it shows. I've got mine, change, schmange, leave well enough alone, keep things precisely as they are, I'm good, thanks. And the pictures portrayed here, of course, are obviously caricatures of very rich people. Top hats, vests, cigars. But, Mr. President, for me, This does not portray people who are rich as much as what's going on with our Republican colleagues. We know all that's been said about the 1%, how well they're doing. CBO reported last week, during the last 25 years, their percentage of the wealth in America has gone up almost 300%. So there'll be a lot of attention focused on the rich, as it should be. But also, Mr. President, I think it should be directed to the Republicans here in the Senate. Not to Republicans around the country, but in this Senate. Because Republicans around the country don't agree. They don't agree things are just fine. They don't agree that we should leave well enough alone. They don't agree that just because what's going on with the rich, that things are okay precisely the way they are. The vast majority of Americans disagree with that. Mr. President, could the staff keep their voice down? It's really distracting. Please talk so I don't have to listen to you, please. Okay? Mr. President, it's true that for a few lucky Americans, things in this country are going just fine. The haves have never had more. And my colleagues in the Republican Party here in the Senate are singularly focused on making sure it stays that way. Everything on this chart applies to what's happened here in the Senate the last 10, 11 months. The gap between the haves and the have-nots has never been bigger. And the middle class is falling farther and farther behind. That's why while Republicans advocate for millionaires and billionaires, Democrats are looking out for working Americans. We've not forgotten that 14 million people are still out of work, or that millions more are struggling to make ends meet. We've not stopped fighting to create good-paying American jobs. That's why Democrats will introduce the Rebuild America Jobs Act tonight. Legislation that will create hundreds of thousands of jobs by investing in our nation's crumbling infrastructure. It would put men and women across this country to work, for example, upgrading 150,000 miles of our highways and roads, laying 4,000 miles of train tracks, restoring 150 miles of airport runways, and installing a modern air traffic control system that no longer relies on World War II-era technology. Of course, it will reduce travel time and delays. Since the economic downturn began, more than 2 million construction workers have lost their jobs. 2 million. That's happened, Mr. President, all over the country. This legislation will send hundreds of thousands of those workers back to job sites to build $27 billion worth of roads, bridges, and other important aspects of our infrastructure. The plan would fund $250 million worth of projects in my state and millions of dollars in the state of Delaware, where the construction industry in Delaware and the United States, every state in the Union, but especially Nevada, it would support about 3,300 badly needed jobs in Nevada. Overall, the Rebuild America Jobs Act would invest $50 billion, taking our citizens off the unemployment rolls, putting them back to work, and ensuring our nation has top-notch infrastructure once again. It will also invest $10 billion to create an infrastructure bank that would leverage private and public capital to fund a wide range of long-delayed projects. And we'll do all this without adding a penny to the deficit. Instead, it would require millionaires and billionaires to contribute their fair share. Incomes netting over $1 million. They would be asked to pay a surcharge of less than 1%, 0.7% to be exact, to get this nation's economy back on track. Americans overwhelmingly support Democrats' plan to invest in roadways, runways, railways. 72% of the American people agree. Mr. President, I don't know if I've been to Jonesboro, Arkansas. I don't know. I've had a number of times I've been there. I had a case that took me there quite a bit all over the state on one occasion. But A man in Jonesboro, Arkansas is quoted in Time magazine, last week's Time magazine, the return of the silent majority. I believe that Drew Ramey qualifies for that. This is what he told Time magazine. I used to think I was a libertarian, but I like my roads now. I like my public services. Drew Ramey of Jonesboro, Arkansas. I used to think I was a libertarian, but I like my roads now. I like my public services. It says it all, Mr. President. This is Drew Ramey of Jonesboro, Arkansas, but he speaks for millions and millions of Americans. Americans of all political persuasions. Even 54% of Republicans believe a world-class economy should have world-class roads and bridges. They agree with what we're trying to do. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and labor unions, AFL-CIO, rarely agree on anything, but they agree on this. They agree that we should pass the Rebuild America Jobs Act and improve the woeful state of America's infrastructure. But it's not only labor and business groups, but it's transit officials, it's mayors, and 3/4 of the American people that support our plan. Actually, it's 76%, Mr. President. Senate Republicans have supported big aspects of this in the past. I could quote a dozen of my Senate Republican colleagues who have spoken out in support of infrastructure investments. One very, very recently. So why aren't they lining up to support our proposal today? Two basic reasons. One, Republicans are determined to see President Obama fail, even if it means Americans fail with him. Sad but true. My colleague, the Republican leader, has said his #1 goal in this Congress is to defeat President Obama. They would rather see the Americans that are struggling so hard to find work than work together. They would rather see the Americans continue to struggle, as I've outlined how many people are struggling. They would rather do that than work together with the President and with us. Second, Republicans are more concerned with protecting millionaires and billionaires. Than they are willing to work with us in putting 14 million people back to work. I heard on the radio this morning, National Broadcasting System, public radio, that during the Bush years we lost 8.6 million jobs. We've only gotten a little over 2 million of those back. About 2.5 million, frankly. It wasn't long ago that a president who was in office for 8 years could boast, if he wanted to do that, about creating 23 million jobs. That's what Republicans have given us. They refuse to ask the rich to contribute a tiny fraction more to secure our economic future, even if it costs more jobs. In recent days, Republicans have shown new interest in the gulf between rich and poor that has motivated thousands to occupy parks across the country and make their voices heard. Apparently, they believe America's staggering income inequality makes a good talking point. Yet while Democrats fight for jobs for the middle class, Republicans fight for tax breaks for the 1% of Americans who don't need our help. And I'll bet if you could ask these very, very rich people, would you be willing to give 0.7% more to create millions of jobs? I think most of them would say yes. Where are my Republican colleagues supporting this simple, common sense legislation? So I say to my Republican colleagues, I would hope that they would move here and work with us. We want to work with them. If we can do something good, Mr. President, there's a lot of goodwill to go around. But we have to make sure that the speeches we've heard from some of our colleagues about creating jobs really amounts to doing something about it, because we haven't seen it yet. Would the chair announce the business for the day?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved, and under the previous order, there will now be a period of morning business until 4:30 p.m. with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Mr. President,
The senator from Hawaii.
Mr. President, I rise today to introduce the Stand Against Violence and Empower Native Women, Save Native Women Act. I would like to thank the co-sponsors of my bill, my good friends, Senators Inouye, Murray, Udall of New Mexico, Begich, Franken, Johnson of South Dakota, Baucus, Tester, and Bingaman. Mr. President, Native women across the country suffer from severe threats to their safety. According to a safety study by the Department of Justice, 2 in 5 girls and women in Native communities will suffer domestic violence, and 1 in 3 will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. Can you imagine looking into the loving eyes of your daughter, sister, or mother and know that one of them will probably be abused in their lifetime? This is a terrible reality of life for Native women and their families across the country. It is an epidemic. It is unacceptable. And we must stand against it. This is why I'm introducing the Save Native Women Act. Most of those who commit these terrible crimes against Native women are not Native themselves. Yet currently, tribes have no ability to prosecute non-Natives for domestic violence and sexual assault in their own communities. This has resulted in a sense of lawlessness and leaves Native women with few places to turn. My bill strengthens tribal jurisdiction over domestic violence and sexual assault so that all offenders, Native and non-Native, can be brought to justice. My bill also strengthens existing programs that support Native victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. In many communities, these programs offer only safety and support available for Native women. And yet these programs are greatly strained. This bill provides programs with more flexibility and tools to address their most critical needs. Finally, my bill addresses the disturbing trend of sex trafficking in many Native communities. I have included provisions that improve data gathering and strengthen programs to better understand and respond to sex trafficking of Native women. I have worked closely with tribes, tribal organizations, and federal agencies to develop this bill. We should not let the next generation of young Native women grow up as their mothers have in unbearable situations that threaten their security, stability, and even their lives. So I urge you to join me and my co-sponsors to stand against violence and support passage of the Save Native Women Act. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the text of my bill be printed in the record.
Without objection.
I yield the time. Thank you.
Mr. President.
The Republican leader.
It's no secret Congress isn't winning any popularity contests these days. Americans are fed up with lawmakers who are either focused on the wrong thing or determined to block any serious reforms that would actually get at the root of the problems that we face. And that's why Republicans have been focused not only on legislation that we think has a good chance of jump-starting private sector job creation in this country, but which also has a good shot at actually becoming law. Put another way, since taking back the majority this year, Republicans in the House of Representatives have focused not only on legislation that avoids the economic missteps of the previous 2.5 years of Democratic control, but which also has a good shot of making it through a Democratic-led Senate. You'd never know it from listening to the President, but there's actually been a significant amount of bipartisan work that's been going on Capitol Hill these days. House Republicans have passed bill after bill, many of them with solid bipartisan support, which would help spur private sector job creation and would help get this economy moving again. But the Democrats who've run the Senate for the past 5 years have ignored virtually all of it. Senate Democrats have decided it isn't in the interest of their party for Congress to get anything done right now. They've adopted a strict strategy of inaction. They simply won't take yes for an answer. So the contrast between Republicans who run the House and Democrats who run the Senate couldn't be starker. Since taking over the House this year, House Republicans have searched for areas of common ground and then invited Democrats who run the Senate to take them up, pass them, and send them on down to the President for a signature. And almost every single time, Senate Democrats have said no. House Republicans now count more than 15 pieces of legislation that would help us chart a very different path from the one the President and his Democratic-controlled Congress have charted over the past few years. This is legislation that would unlock America's energy resources, cut back on excessive regulations that are holding back job creation, and enable businesses like Boeing to make their own decisions about how and where to expand. Just last week, the House passed a bill to get rid of an IRS withholding tax on businesses that do work for the government. More than 400 members of the House voted for this bill, including 170 Democrats. Here's how one prominent Democrat described this bill. The repeal of this requirement, he said, will free up small business cash flow, increasing their ability to add jobs and to bid on new projects. Republicans support this legislation. Democrats support this legislation. The President included this legislation in his own jobs bill, and he supports the bill that passed the House last week. There's no reason the Senate shouldn't take it up right now. This is one small thing we can do right now to reduce the burden on employers across the country. We came together to help them earlier this month by passing free trade bills. Let's build on that success and pass this bill that job creators are telling us will help protect and create jobs. Like Senate Democrats, the President may think he benefits from the appearance of inaction in Congress. That's why he's running around the country reminding people how bad the economy is, instead of urging Democrats who run the Senate to work with Republicans who run the House. But, Mr. President, with all due respect, the American people already know the economy is in bad shape. That's not news to anybody. They don't need the President to tell them that. They live it. What they need is for the President to get his party to agree to something that helps. I know that Democrats will argue that our proposals for job creation wouldn't be their first choice. My response is that the Democrats had 3 years to do something about jobs and the economy. The President's signature jobs bill costs nearly $8 trillion. 2.5 years later, there are 1.5 million fewer jobs in this country than on the day that legislation was signed. So why don't we try a different approach? Let's try an approach that actually takes into account the concerns of the struggling business owners who are ultimately going to lift us out of this jobs crisis. They've told us what they want. It's not a mystery what we need to do to help these folks create jobs. Temporary fixes and more stimulus bills isn't it. So my message is this. The Democrats in Washington need to start taking yes for an answer. Republicans have put forward more than a dozen concrete proposals to spur job creation in this country that avoid the economic mistakes the Democrats made over the past few years. We've done the hard work of legislating and looking for areas where the parties overlap on the issues. It's time for the President to signal to Democrats in Congress it's okay to work with us. Everyone knows the economy is in bad shape. What Republicans are saying is that higher taxes and more government spending isn't the way to help it. Everyone knows the federal government in Washington is spending way too much money it doesn't have. What Republicans are saying is the solution isn't to spend even more. Everyone knows that if the two parties are going to come together and act, you need to design legislation that appeals to both sides. And that's exactly what Republicans are doing. So it's time to put the political playbook aside and actually take action. Republicans in the House are doing their job. It's time for the President and Senate Democrats to do theirs. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Alabama.
I thank the Republican leader for his comments and would just say that the time that we can borrow from the future to spend today to create some sort of sugar high to create jobs is past. We've tried that. The debt has now reached a level that the debt itself is a threat to our economy. It's a cloud over our economy. It is slowing the growth and job creation that we need to move out of the difficult financial times that we're in. I truly believe that. I think the debt itself now is a threat to us. So I want to speak, Mr. President, about the minibus appropriations bill that's before us, its effect on the budget that we have, and that's before the body. As the ranking Republican on the Budget Committee, I do believe it's my responsibility to present, as I am able, a straightforward, honest figures about the spending bills that come before our Senate. H.R. 2112 is the first of several minibus bills that apparently will be used in lieu of the normal appropriations process. This minibus is so named because it contains 3 appropriation bills put in one, not one as we normally see before the Senate. The Agriculture Bill, Commerce, Justice, Science, and the Transportation and Housing Bill, all cobbled together in one. The Democratic majority contends that this package will save taxpayers money. But this is just more Washington accounting. We've crunched the numbers and discovered that these bills will not cut spending, but will actually increase spending by $10 billion over last year. So I'd like to take a moment to explain, because this is very, very important. We had an agreement that we would begin the most smallest of reductions this year in spending, not nearly enough. But we reached that agreement, and we should honor that at least. So this is the first appropriations bill the Senate has considered after the discretionary spending caps were established as part of the recent debt limit negotiations. The Budget Control Act, which you remember was passed to raise the debt ceiling. And as an exchange for agreeing to raise the debt ceiling, as President Obama asked, Congress insisted that there be some curtailment of spending so we wouldn't hit the debt ceiling again so soon. So the Budget Control Act, as the bill was pretentiously named, in August requires that discretionary spending be brought down this year from $1,050 billion to $1,043 billion in fiscal year 2012. An alleged total spending reduction of a paltry $7 billion throughout the entire year. Presumably, the other $6 billion that was required to be saved under this agreement will be saved in other bills that come before the Congress. Presumably. We haven't seen them yet. So does the bill, as before us, move us toward even this minor goal? That's the question. The majority party says it does. They contend that the bill, the minibus, spends $128 billion, which is $1 billion less than last year when it was $129 billion, a reduction of less than 10%, and they're very proud of this. But remember, just remember as an aside, that non-defense, discretionary spending alone in the first 2 years of President Obama's presidency went up 24%. So to take a $1 billion reduction is basically to hold in place this surge in spending at a time when this nation has never, ever faced such a severe debt threat to its future. But, and us going through the bill and thinking it through, the Budget Control Act also created a new category of spending placed in the Budget Control Act, if you remember, cobbled together in the dead of night, brought up on the floor on the eve of a financial crisis and demanded that it be passed, and hardly anyone had a chance to read it. Unknown to most of us, it allowed spending above the 1,043 limit for disaster assistance. And the debt limit deal provided for an allowance for disaster spending equal to the average of the 10 prior years of disaster spending, which can be assessed or spent simply by providing the proper words in the appropriations bills that come forward across the floor, as these three do. But the majority contends that this money should magically not be counted when you decide how much is spent by the bill. Why? Well, it's a disaster, and disaster spending doesn't count, don't you know? As amended on the Senate floor 2 weeks ago, the bill contains now $3.2 billion in new spending above the caps for disaster relief, a further increase of 20% to the disaster assistance. Two additional amendments were adopted just last week, adding to the amount that the committees had produced as disaster assistance. And while there are arguments that the $3.2 billion should not be counted as an expenditure, you could argue that. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, our official scorekeeper, includes it as an expenditure. It's included as an expenditure in the CBO's score, $3.2 billion. No one has challenged them because it appears they are plainly correct to count the $2.2 billion as spending. Only in Washington can it be asserted that the government can spend $3.2 billion and it not count. The bill sponsors contend that the discretionary spending portion of the bill, as I indicated, has gone down from $129 billion to $128. But CBO says it went up to $131 billion. The disaster funding represents a 2% discretionary increase at a time when spending is supposed to be going down. Further, the bill sponsors say you should not count the mandatory spending in it. mandatory programs that are contained in the bill. They insist that mandatory spending is not under the control of the appropriators. Again, this is logic that only exists in Washington. In truth, it's not unusual for the Appropriations Committee to take actions that impact mandatory programs, and it can be done, but of course it was not in this bill. For example, food stamps, the largest mandatory program by far in this bill, actually is larger than any other program in the whole bill. It amounts to 75% of total agriculture appropriation spending. 75%. Most people think agriculture programs are bailing out farmers. Those benefits to farmers have been reduced steadily over the years. Now 75% of the agriculture bill is a mandatory program, the food stamps being the largest. And this program, under the legislation that's before us today, is set to increase by 14% next year. $10 billion more than just last year. A $10 billion increase in the food stamp program, but that doesn't count. It's contingent. This spending increase results in a doubling of the food stamp budget over the past 3 years. Doubling the budget in 3 years. And a quadrupling it 4 times over the last 10 years. We have got to look under the hood of this program and find out what's happening to it. But nothing is seriously being done. Like welfare reform, responsible changes to the way the government operates this program will improve outcomes, help more needy people achieve the goal of financial independence, not dependence, and stop fraud, which most Americans know is pretty common in the food stamp program. Now, when I offered an amendment to save a modest $10 billion over the next 10 years, a reform that would not have reduced eligibility for any of the needy, but only require recipients that the recipients meet the minimum legal requirements of the program, actually be needy and qualify for the program by reducing fraud and abuse, the amendment was defeated. Right here, the floor of the Senate would have saved $10 billion, according to the Congressional Budget Office, by making sure that people make actual formal applications for their food stamps and sign a document saying that they actually qualify for it. Is that too much to ask? Senator Stabenow, the Agriculture Authorizing Committee chair, rose to explain that we're not to worry because while we're increasing food stamp funding now, at some other time her committee will recommend and produce a bill perhaps that will reduce it by $23 billion over 10 years. But if that promise were to be fulfilled, the effect on the fiscal FY12 budget would be that food stamp spending would increase this year approximately $8 billion, or 10% increase, rather than $10 billion, a 14% increase. The program has indeed doubled since 2008. But now we're hearing in reports that this $23 billion in savings is not even in the food stamp program, or most of it is not. We're hearing that 19% of it is a further reduction of aid to farmers, and only $4 billion of the reduction in savings would be from food stamps. So, here's the bottom line. When discretionary and mandatory spending are scored in this bill, the overall spending compared to last year went up by $10 billion, or 4% increase, not a cut. Relative to the amounts senators approved for these 3 bills last year, we're being asked to increase spending, not decrease spending. I believe that's fair and honest analysis of the bill that's before us. And if you were to exclude the mandatory spending, just ignore that huge increase in the food stamp program, the SNAP program, and even say the disaster assistance should be ignored, the so-called reduction in spending would be only a paltry $1 billion on these three bills all combined. So it's time to get serious. Denial in this Congress must end. You can't borrow your way out of debt. We are spending money we do not have. 40% of every dollar we spend is borrowed, on which we pay interest every year. It is digging us deeper in a hole. It just cannot be contended that this is serious work toward reducing our deficit. It just cannot be. Our deficit in fiscal year 11, last year, just ended September 30th, was just shy of $1,300 billion. A spending cut of $7 billion for this year is a mere pittance in comparison. In no way is it even close to a significant reduction of the projected deficit we're going to have in this fiscal year, which began October 1st. We're now at Halloween. We still haven't passed the appropriation bill for the year we're in. Congress is not performing responsibly. It just is not. We haven't had a budget in over 900 days. The Majority Leader, Senator Reid, said it would be foolish to have a budget. No wonder the American people are unhappy with us. How can this be? We are responsible people. We're proposing to spend next year $1,043 billion and act as if we're proud to have reduced the spending by $7 billion when we'll have over $1,000 billion in debt, $1 trillion plus next year. But it gets worse. The bill also contains a number of Washington accounting tricks to sweep new spending under the rug. It's full of the typical gimmicks used to shove more spending into a bill that's already reached its spending limit. We've reached our limit. I remain amazed at the creativity used by spenders to defeat budget limits. Would that they would use such creativity to control spending. Would we not be so much better off? I've already talked about the new authority granted by the Budget Control Act to designate an item as a disaster outside and above the budget. It doesn't count if you call it a disaster, and to spend the money without a formal vote by the Senate to declare it a disaster. Indeed, until the Budget Control Act passed, you had to have 60 votes to declare something a disaster, to go above the budget. That's been eliminated. That was changed in this Budget Control Act that reduced control over budget. It reduced the power of the budget to contain spending by eliminating this end run. At least you used to have 60 votes to spend above the budget by calling it a disaster. Now you don't. When they first floated this idea that they were going to put disaster spending in the bill and in the budget, and it was going to be averaged out what we normally spend, I thought that was a good idea. That, well, we know on average we've been spending this much for disasters. Let's put it in the budget and only have 60 votes to have, and only spend above that if it met that standard that we've traditionally had. The idea was to arrange the amount of disaster spending and put it in the budget, but in the shell game, that's Washington, that is not what the fine print did. The Budget Control Act establishes, in effect now, a slush fund to spend money above the budget limits, eliminating the 60-vote requirement for emergency designation. There is $3.2 billion in spending under this new authority that's in this bill, the first of the multiple minibuses we'll see. At the rate we're going, the ceiling of $11.3 billion for disaster established under the Budget Control Act will be exhausted, and more emergency spending will be needed to further address legitimate disaster needs. But there will be no need for 60 votes to do so. That vote has been eliminated. In addition, the bill uses another gimmick to rescind discretionary appropriations provided in prior years that for one reason or another can no longer be spent for their intended purposes. That is, the bill rescinds budget authority that CBO estimates will not result in any cash savings over the next 10 years. Rather than letting the appropriations lapse and saving this money and being thankful we got the project done at less than normal, less than the projected cost, this bill, as has been done before, pretends to be responsible and rescinds that money, which is then used to pay for the spending that will, in fact, result in cash expenditures from the Treasury. So this one gimmick in this bill would add $131 million in off-the-books spending. Finally, the bill finds savings in mandatory programs that game the government's cash flow and score as savings for this bill, but don't actually reduce the cost to the taxpayers. These so-called chimps, we've got a name for it now, changes in mandatory program spending total $8.5 billion in this bill. Of that amount, an astonishing 88%, or $7.5 billion, result in no net spending reduction over 10 years. Some of these chimps have been going on year after year. One example is the Crime Victims Fund. Every year, Congress says that the crime victims will get the funds they are due under the law next year, which unfortunately for the Crime Victims Fund has not yet arrived since the annual deferral began in fiscal year 2000. In other words, it's done every year. And there seems to be no prospect that this raid will continue. Meanwhile, appropriators get to spend the amount deferred over and over again, enabling ever higher amounts of discretionary spending. It would be like a family delaying a single $500 home repair for 10 years and then counting it as $5,000 in savings, $500 every year. The repair didn't take place. In this case, over the past 3 years, the gimmick used in this bill has enabled $14 billion in higher spending.
The senator is informed we're in a period of morning business where 10 minutes is allotted per senator.
I would thank the chair, and I would ask one additional minute to close up.
Without objection.
So I'm unable, Mr. President, to support this bill. By its own standards, it fails. It represents everything that's wrong with Washington today. It crams 3 bills into one that should have been considered individually, creating a process that curtails debate on spending at a time when we need more debate, not less. Further, it does virtually nothing to address the fiscal crisis threatening this country. It treats spending caps established earlier this summer as the most that can be saved, not as the starting point for saving, and then uses gimmicks to spend over and above that advertised limit. It's not a serious response to the explosive growth in federal spending. It falls short of the commitment we must make to handle the taxpayers' dollars honestly and responsibly. It's business as usual. The American people deserve better. I thank the chair and yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk about a serious public health crisis facing our nation and to highlight some of the important progress that we have made today. We are currently confronting unprecedented shortages of critical medications. These drug shortages have impacted people across our country, forcing some patients to delay their life-saving treatments or use unproven, less effective alternatives. In some cases, drug shortages have resulted in patients not being able to get the kind of treatment that they've gotten, in getting slow in getting their treatment, in getting left behind. I've been working to address this problem for over a year, since I first heard from hospitals, pharmacists, and patients in Minnesota that they were facing shortages of essential medications, particularly chemotherapy drugs. Their urgency led me to send a letter to FDA Commissioner Hamburg to take actions to address this public crisis. Over the next few months, I continued to receive calls and visits from constituents asking help to find medications in short supply. I worked with manufacturers, stakeholders, and the FDA to try to find an appropriate solution to ensure that patients continued to receive the care that they deserve and they need. I would also add that while in several cases the crisis was averted, this took hours and hours of individual pharmacists' time, of individual doctors' time, and at a time when we are trying to be as efficient as possible in our health care system, the last thing we need is to have a doctor or a nurse or a pharmacist spending half a day just looking for medication because there is a shortage. In February, I introduced the Preserving Access to Life-Saving Medications Act with Senator Casey. This legislation, which has bipartisan support and a total of 17 co-sponsors, would give the Food and Drug Administration the ability to require early notification from pharmaceutical companies when a factor arises that may result in a shortage. And today, the President issued an executive order that adopts this framework for an early notification system. The executive order will do this. It will push drug companies to notify the FDA of any impending shortage of certain prescription drugs. It will expand the FDA's current efforts to expedite review of new manufacturing sites, drug suppliers, and manufacturing changes. And it will direct the FDA to work with the Department of Justice to examine whether drug companies have responded to potential drug shortages or other third parties have engaged in hoarding medications or raising prices to gouge consumers. This action will help further reduce and prevent drug shortages, protect consumers, and prevent price gouging. This step enhances actions that have already been taken by the FDA, and it puts in place additional tools to address drug shortages. Mr. President, this is something you probably didn't even hear about a few years ago. But this year we've learned that drug shortages are having a direct toll on families across America. Just a couple of months ago, I met a young boy named Axel Zerbis. Axel is a cute 4-year-old boy from the Twin Cities with bright eyes and a big smile. He also happens to have no hair on his head. That's because Axel is being treated for leukemia. When he was scheduled to start chemotherapy earlier this year, Axel's parents learned that an essential drug, cytarabine, was in short supply and might not be available for their son. Understandably, they were thrown into a panic and desperately looked for any alternatives. They even prepared to take Axel to Canada, where cytarabine is still readily available. Just imagine this. Your parents of a 4-year-old just find out he has life-threatening leukemia, and you can't get the medication, which is actually quite commonplace in the treatment of this disease, and you're starting to prepare to fly to Canada because our own country somehow has not kept up with the supply of this drug. Fortunately, he never had to go to Canada. At the last minute, the hospital was able to secure the medication from a pharmacy that still had a supply. But Axel and his parents, sadly, are not alone. There were 178 drug shortages reported in 2010. Now, keep in mind, Mr. President, these are not individual stories like Axel's. These are actual drugs, 178 different drugs across the country, basically affecting millions of patients that had drug shortages in 2010. That is a dramatic increase from just 5 years ago. 55 shortages just 5 years ago. Think of that increase. For some of these drugs, no substitute drugs are available. or if they are, they're less effective and they may involve greater risks of adverse side effects. The chance of medical errors also rises as providers are forced to use drugs they're not familiar with. A survey conducted by the American Hospital Association showed that nearly 100% of their hospitals experienced a shortage in the past year. Another survey conducted by Premier Health System showed that 89% of its hospitals and pharmacists experienced shortages that have caused a medication safety issue or an error in patient care. We want to be doing the opposite, Mr. President. We want to be reducing errors. We want to be getting patients the help that they need. It is clear that there are a large number of overlapping factors that are resulting in unprecedented shortages. Experts cite a number of factors that are responsible. These include market consolidation, poor business incentives, manufacturing problems and production delays, unexpected increases in demand for a drug, inability to procure raw materials, and even the influence of the gray market, where people are basically hoarding these drugs when they find out that there could be a shortage and then upping the prices as if things weren't bad enough. Financial decisions in the pharmaceutical industry are also a major factor. Many of these medications are in short supply because companies have simply stopped production. They decided it wasn't profitable enough to keep producing them. Instead of the lower-priced and lower-profit generic drugs, companies are looking at more expensive brand-name drugs. Mergers in the drug industry have narrowed the focus of product lines. As a result, some products are discontinued or production is moved to different sites, leading to delays. When drugs are made by only a few companies, Mr. President, a decision by one drug company can have a huge impact on the market. To help correct a poor market environment, or to prevent gray market drugs from contaminating our medication supply chain, we must address the drug shortage problem at its root. The early notification system that would be established under the Preserving Access to Life-Saving Medications Act and the President's executive order that is advanced today will help the FDA take the lead in working with pharmacy groups, drug manufacturers, and healthcare providers to better manage for impending shortages, more effectively manage shortages when they occur, and minimize the impact on patient care. Now, what does this really mean? Well, just so you know, the FDA already does this with orphan drugs when there is just one drug and the drug manufacturer thinks that they're going to run out of the drug. They do tell the FDA. So the FDA can step in and maybe look internationally for another drug. You saw that happen with the H1N1 virus when we had a short supply. They went to other countries. They're allowed to do that now, but they're not, manufacturers are not required to do it in some of the situations we're encountering now with those 178 drug shortage. That's what our bill does. It basically says if you see a drug shortage coming down the pike because a number or one of these factors are present, you have to let the FDA know. You have to work with the FDA because they have successfully averted dozens of drug shortages this year. So we don't pretend this is going to solve everything, Mr. President, but it's at least something we can do right now, which will give the FDA the power to go in there and work with the drug manufacturers and try to find other sources. So the person isn't doing that is the parent of a 4-year-old kid with leukemia, or a pharmacist who's trying to serve customers at his pharmacy, or a doctor who's trying to treat patients and she has to get on the phone and call a bunch of hospitals to try to find a drug. This simply doesn't make any sense at all. This is a national problem, not a problem for a 4-year-old boy. Our legislation would also direct the FDA to provide up-to-date public notification of any actual shortage situations and the actions the agency would take to address them. Additionally, the bill requires the FDA to develop an evidence-based list of drugs vulnerable to shortages and to work with the manufacturers to come up with a continuity of operations plan to address potential problems that may result in a shortage. And the bill would also direct the FDA to establish an expedited reinspection process for manufacturers of a product in shortage. This would allow them to get inspected sooner so we can get the drugs to market. With manufacturers providing early notification, the FDA's drug shortage team, which already exists, can then appropriately use their tools to prevent shortages from happening. As I mentioned, in the last 2 years, the FDA, with early notification and more information, has successfully prevented 137 drug shortages. So this is something that actually works. While the President's executive order takes steps toward advancing these goals, he has made clear that we must pass this bill in order to protect patients and ensure consumers that they have access to the life-saving medications that they need and deserve. So the executive order helps, but we still need to pass this bill. I understand that this may be a short-term solution to a long-term problem. That's why I have also been working with several of my colleagues on a bipartisan basis to come up with a broad, permanent solution, one that includes methods to address the root causes of drug shortages. This includes Senator McCain and Senator Corker, and it includes Senator Burr, and I also see Senator Blumenthal here, who has been working on this issue. We have basically senators, including Senator Casey and others, working with the Health Committee who've been working to get this done. At the urging of this bipartisan working group, the FDA held a public workshop in September that brought together patient advocates, consumer groups, healthcare professionals, and researchers to discuss the causes and the impact of drug shortages and possible strategies for preventing or mitigating future shortages. In addition to the work group, I've been speaking with a broad range of stakeholders to try to discover why we have seen such a large number of drug shortages that we have not seen in the past. The facts don't lie, the numbers don't lie. There has been an enormous increase in the number of drug shortages. This current explosion of shortages appears to be a consequence of a lack of supply of certain products to keep up with a substantial expansion in the scope and demand for these products. Due to the complex nature of these drug shortages, there is no single or simple solution that will solve all problems. A solution will require everyone involved to play a role in mitigating future drug shortages. We must ensure that we have the manufacturing capabilities to keep up with demand. One solution may be to provide tax incentives to incentivize manufacturers to continue to make drugs that are on the shortage list, or to provide other market incentives, such as including exclusivity pricing, similar to those that we give to manufacturers who make orphan drugs. In addition, I've urged the FDA to improve their communication with patients and providers. This will ensure that patients and doctors are not the last to know when there is a shortage. I also favor permanent reimportation of drugs from safe countries like Canada. Not everyone involved in this issue thinks that a good idea, but I can tell you if we were to allow that little 4-year-old boy wouldn't have had to start looking at flights to Canada. One thing is clear. This is a national public health crisis that must be addressed. The President's actions today will provide additional tools to address drug shortages, but more must be done. I will continue to work with my colleagues in the bipartisan working group for a broad, permanent solution. I will also continue to work with Senator Casey, with you, Mr. Presiding Officer, and with all of the other senators involved in this, including Senator Susan Collins, to get our legislation passed. It is common sense. It is not over the top. It simply takes a tool that's used now to avert drug shortages for orphan drugs and expands it so that other drug manufacturers, when they have drugs that are going to experience a shortage, are required to notify the FDA, and it just gives the FDA that little extra time, whether it's 1 month, whether it's 6 months, whether it's a year, to look for the drug in other locations. And I think it also would give us some insight into what is actually going on here so we can fix this. Thank you very much, Mr. President.